Hello again, welcome to another episode of the Virginia Wine Notebook YouTube channel. Virginia Wine and Song is the name of the series, and this is where I pair Virginia wine from a Virginia winery with what I consider to be kind of underrated album from the rock and roll or the pop era. Everybody has their own definition. I decided to choose 1964 through 1999. There's a lot of music that, rock music and alternative rock music and pop music that's been made since the year 99. But for me, in my personal history, that's where I kind of land when I think about the classic era. So I'm going to talk about a Virginia wine, and then I'm going to segue into talking about an album from that era that I think is underrated. So the winery I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to try to keep these short because once again, I find myself pontificating a little bit too much about wine and music because I really I'm passionate about those two things, especially Virginia wine. So I'm going to talk about a winery now that's located in the Shenandoah Valley, and that seems to be where I've been kind of focusing because I looked back at some of the videos that I've taken in the recent couple of weeks, and they've pretty much all been in the Shenandoah Valley. Well, that's because that's where I live now. I used to be headquartered or living in Northern Virginia, but now I'm in the Shenandoah Valley. So that's actually a good thing, I think, because a lot of people who are in Northern Virginia may not come out to the wineries in the Shenandoah Valley. They'll, usually hang around the ones that are in Northern Virginia because it's more convenient for them, or they may go down on a weekend excursion or even a full week excursion to Charlottesville, because Charlottesville has so many wineries now in the Charlottesville and Waynesboro area that you could probably spend an entire week down there and go to a different winery or even two wineries every day and never go to the same one twice. I mean, that's how many wineries there are in that area now, and there's Monticello AVA. So the winery I'm going to talk about now is not too far from the Charlottesville and Waynesboro area. It's actually between Waynesboro is a city that's in Augusta County, and there are actually more wineries, I think, around Waynesboro than there are around Charlottesville, although I could be wrong about that. A lot of my favorite wineries happen to be around Waynesboro. So before I moved here, when I went down to that area of Virginia, I usually stayed in Waynesboro at a motel or Airbnb or something. I didn't really stay in Charlottesville that much because it was so expensive. And plus, the wineries I really liked were around the Waynesboro area. And this winery is between Waynesboro and Stanton. It's in a little town called Fishersville. It's up on a mountain, on a hillside, and it's called Barren Ridge. And I think Barren Ridge is the name of the ridge where the winery resides and the vineyards reside. And it's very, very scenic. It's not near the town. I mean, Fishersville is a small little town. I think their biggest industry there is there's a big hospital in Fishersville, and I think that's the main employer for that little town. But this winery is not too far from the town itself, and it's about halfway between Stanton and Waynesboro. So if you stay in one of those cities for your weekend excursion, you can easily get to Barren Ridge. And this is one of my favorite places in Virginia because I love the view that's up there. It's very relaxing. They usually have really good live music that's not too overwhelming. I found sometimes you go to a winery and some of the live musicians are a little overwhelming with their setup. Their microphones are a little bit too loud and their speakers are cranked too high, and it kind of overpowers the experience, for me at least. This place usually has more acoustic and very quieter types of talent there. And this is a Barren Ridge, and the wines that they have at Red Baron is the name of the wine. Barren Ridge is the name of the winery. This is Red Baron, named after, of course, the Red Baron, but spelled like Baron, B-A-R-R-E-N. And the wines that they have at Barren Ridge are the usual suspects, the ones that you're going to find at most Virginia wineries. They do have a Petit Verdot, and they have Merlot. Merlot is now becoming popular again after kind of falling out of favor because of the movie Sideways, as we remember. They have, of course, a Cab Franc. As far as whites are concerned, they have a Chardonnay, and they have something called Harmony, which is a blend of Petit Manseng and Vellet Blanc. And they even have a Riesling because their elevation is high enough. When you get into the Shenandoah Valley, if their vineyards are high elevation, they can do a lot of varietals that you don't see in Northern Virginia, like Riesling. Riesling is really common in, of course, the Finger Lakes of New York, But they can do it down there because of their elevation. I think at one time, well, there is a winery in Stanton, which I'll talk about in some other broadcast, but there is a winery in Stanton that actually does a Pinot Noir, but I'll talk about that in a later broadcast. Today we're going to be talking about Baron Ridge. This is the Red Baron, and I think this is probably their most popular red. It's at least my favorite. And it's a blend. It's a blend of Chambourcin, which Chambourcin is one of those styles that you either really like or you dislike. And I know a lot of people who like the bolder reds who hate Chambourcin. Chambourcin is very similar, I think, to a Chianti. It's a lot lighter. You can actually chill a Chambourcin a little bit. I talked about Chambourcin in my video about an Armada winery. But this is a blend of Chambourcin, Petit Verdot, which is kind of the opposite of Chambourcin. Petit Verdot is a lot bolder, and it's got Merlot and Touriga. And Touriga is a very unusual grape to find in Virginia, but this is a blend of those, and it's very easy drinking. It's a great, I wouldn't really call it a table wine. It's just a good everyday, not every day, but it goes well with the usual suspects for red wines. You can have red meat, you can have pasta, you can have even possibly pizza if you want to have kind of a thin crust pizza. That'll go really well with this. Stew would really go with this. It's just a perfect red wine, and I think it's probably their most popular wine in this particular winery. They also have a Meritage, and they belong to the association where they can use the term Meritage. Meritage is a red blend that's usually made up of the main Bordeaux style grapes, Cab Sauv, Cab Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and then sometimes they put in something unusual in there like Malbec or Touriga or something, or Tannat even, probably not Norton, but they belong to that membership, so they can use the name Meritage. I didn't buy the Meritage. Meritage, when you go to a winery and you see a Meritage blend there, those are usually going to be the more pricey ones they have because they have to pay for that membership to use that name. But all the Meritages I have had have been excellent, so they're definitely worth checking out. But this is the Red Baron, which is another red blend. They also have a port. And if you're a real collector of wines and you like to keep wines for a long time, like over 10 or 20 years even, ports will age very well as long as you age them properly and keep them out, of course, keep them out of sunlight, keep them in a kind of a damp, cool area. If you don't have a wine cellar, which of course you have to be kind of in the money probably to have a wine cellar, a dedicated wine cellar. What I found is a closet does really, really well. In my house, I actually have a closet, a little closet that's under the staircase, and that works really, really well for storing wine. So, and I don't collect. Again, I don't have a budget for that. But anyway, great wine. Port is really great as well. So what goes well with this wine? Oh, by the way, last thing I want to say about the winery. They're based in Fishersville, Virginia, like I said, between Stanton and Waynesboro. But they have a satellite tasting room now too, called Castle Vineyards. Castle Vineyards is located near Luray. It's actually close to where I live. It's a 10-minute drive from where I live because I live in Luray. And they're like 10 minutes up the road. They're right off of 340 between Luray and Front Royal. So you can try their wines there without driving all the way down to Stanton or Fishersville, which is from Northern Virginia. I would say Fishersville and Stanton are probably about 2.5 hours, depending on traffic. It's kind of a drive. You couldn't do it in a day. But if you don't mind going out to Luray, a little closer, you can try their wines there because they sell most of the Baron Ridge wines at Castle Vineyards. I think Castle's going to have their own wines at some point, but they're relatively new. I think they just opened about 2 years ago. So that's a really good place to go to enjoy Baron Ridge wine. You can even join the wine club there and get access to Baron Ridge. So anyway, that's it. Baron Ridge, great wine, great winery. And what does this wine go with? And I've been trying to find an album or an artist that matches well with the wine, and sometimes it's very difficult to do that unless it's obvious. Like I did one on Blenheim, which is the winery owned by Dave Matthews, and because he was a musician, I was able to find an album that paired really well. I don't have any Dave Matthews in my collection, so I had to pick something else. But for this one, I concentrated on the word red, the color red. So we have the color red. What goes well with that? Well, The album I picked is actually probably, a controversial pick. It's a provocative one. Even back when this album came out in 1974, it was considered to be, kind of risque and kind of envelope pushing. And it's from an artist who is, he's been called a cult musician or a cult artist. I'm not really sure why they call him a cult artist, because his name is Randy Newman. And you've heard of Randy Newman. If you've seen any Disney movie in the last 25 or 30 years, you've heard Randy Newman songs. His most famous song is probably You've Got a Friend in Me, which is from Toy Story, very kid-friendly. But he also put out a lot of albums, especially starting in the late 60s. He's put out a lot of albums, and he didn't get a lot of airplay on the radio, but a lot of his songs have become standards. They've been covered by many, many other artists, like Three Dog Night covered one of his songs, Mama Told Me Not to Come. And his biggest hit, I think, is actually Short People, which was a hit in 1977, which was controversial because they thought he was making fun of people who were small, small people. And he wasn't. He's a satirist. His lyrics are very, they're basically satire. They're full of a lot of black humor. He's very sarcastic, very similar to Donald Fagen, I think, from Steely Dan. There's similarities there. But this album is actually entitled Good Old Boys. And you can probably tell from the title that, this is not going to be an album that's going to be popular in rural Mississippi, probably. He's actually from Louisiana. So Randy Newman is, he's very self-deprecating. He considers himself to be kind of a good old boy. He doesn't have much of a Bayou accent, but he's, when I found out he was from Louisiana years ago, I was surprised because he's got a real New York or LA sensibility. And of course, he's written I Love LA, which is one of his hits from the 80s. But this album is called Good Old Boys, and I don't think it had any singles from it. Again, he wasn't a real big singles artist. He didn't have a lot of songs on the radio. Short People was a fluke hit. He even did Short People on Saturday Night Live. And Short People is actually from another album that he made in 1977 called Little Criminals, and that actually features a lot of members from the Eagles on that album. I almost focused on that album because it's almost like a long lost Eagles song album. There's Glenn Frey is on that album, and I think Timothy B. Schmidt is on that album, and I think Henley is on that album, and backup singers on the Little Criminals album. But on this album, it's pretty much just him. And the back of the album, and if you decide that you want to read the lyrics before you buy the album, he's got the lyrics printed on the back of the cover. Again, makes it even more kind of controversial because there's some lyrics in here that would not go well today. Even if you played it in front of people who are progressives, they would hear the song. There's a song on here called Rednecks, and that's actually the song that opens the album, and that's why I chose this. Not because I consider Barren Ridge to be a redneck winery. Far from it. It's meant to be a satire of growing up amongst people from the rural parts of America, especially now, as polarized as this country is with the rural and the urban mindsets. This song Rednecks, even if liberals would hear it, they probably would be offended because he uses the N-word in it, and it's very, very much, it's a very edgy song. So, and it's the first song on the album. And the first line of the song is actually a jab at entertainers. So it's provocative to say the least. The whole album is sort of kind of like a tribute in a way to the South. Not all of it is satire. He has a song on here called Birmingham, which is all about Birmingham, Alabama. And it's like a tribute. There's nothing really offensive on Birmingham. It's just about a guy who considers Birmingham to be the best city in the world. And there's other stuff on here. Every Man a King and Kingfish, which are kind of like dual songs that are on this album, which was about Kingfish, who was a Standard Oil. Unfortunately, my history of Louisiana and the robber barons is I can't think of his name now, but he was a big political influence, and his nickname was the Kingfish. Somebody please mention that. Put that in the comments, please, because I'm drawing a blank on who that's supposed to be. I would probably fail at Louisiana or Southern history, but Wedding in Cherokee County, Louisiana 1927. Now that song, Louisiana 1927, is about the levees breaking in New Orleans. and causing flooding. And that song had a revival right after Hurricane Katrina. That was actually a really top downloaded song by him, Louisiana 1927. That is based on a real flood. So anyway, it's a really, really good album. Probably my favorite song on this album is Marie, which is a love song, and it's probably the best love song that Randy Newman has ever recorded. It's just, it makes you almost tear up. It's so achingly beautiful, and he's obviously singing it to somebody he knows. It's very, very personal. And the last song on here is a song called Rolling. And I think if you've seen the movie Night of the Hunter with Robert Mitchum's character is like this evil fake preacher in that movie, and he sings a song while he's on a horseback trying to hunt down these kids, these children. And he sings a song that's very similar, I think, to the song Rolling. So I'm not sure if that was deliberate by Randy Newman or not, but this is a remaster. This is actually a heavy vinyl pressing. This came out, these heavy vinyl pressings of Randy Newman albums came out in 2017. And they were put out by None Such Records. And None Such Records is actually a classical music label, but they also put out, remasters every now and then. And this is the Good Old Boys. He was on the Reprise label, and then he switched over to Warner Brothers in, I think, 76 or so. But he was on Reprise, and Reprise is an interesting label because that was a label that was run by Frank Sinatra's company. And the PR people for Frank Sinatra thought they would be very, very trendy, and they tried to find artists that would appeal to the young people, as Frank Sinatra probably would call them at the time. So the PR people signed up Randy Newman, they signed up Neil Young, they signed up, I think Fleetwood Mac, the early Fleetwood Mac was on Reprise. I think even the 1975 album by Fleetwood Mac was on Reprise. So there were a lot of great artists that were on Reprise. Gordon Lightfoot. So anyway, a great album to enjoy. Even if you want to be risky and listen to the first song on the album, you're not going to be hearing this album in its entirety at a winery. Even places that do vinyl night, if they put this song on, because like I said, that controversial song is the very first song on the album. So, a lot of people when they go to wineries and breweries, they may not be listening to the music, it's just there as background because they're engaged in conversation. But if all of a sudden the place got quiet and they heard the first couple of lyrics to Rednecks, people will be like, what in the world is this? So anyway, Randy Newman and the Good Old Boys album, and then Red Baron wine from Baron Ridge Winery in Waynesboro area. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.